In the grand halls of Marwood Manor, a summer fate turns deadly when Sir Reginald Marwood is found lifeless, a poisoned cigarette beside him. Was it a heart attack or a chilling murder? Enter Hercule Poirot, the meticulous Belgian detective whose little grey cells unravel a web of secrets, debts, betrayals, and a forged letter in a feminine hand. Who among the elegant Lady Eleanor, fiery Beatrice, timid Clara, or cunning Dr. Lanscombe hides a killer's heart? As clues whisper of cyanide and deceit, one question haunts: who dared to strike in plain sight? Unravel the truth in Hercule Poirot's novel secrets and surprising twists. A mystery where every detail matters, and the final twist will leave you breathless. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Marwood Manor. The late summer sun cast a golden haze over the sprawling lawns of Marwood Manor, a grand Jacobean pile nestled in the heart of the Devon countryside. Its ivy-clad walls and mullioned windows gleamed with an air of timeless dignity. Yet beneath the serene facade, an undercurrent of unease rippled through the gathered guests. The occasion was the annual summer fete, a tradition upheld by the Marwood family for generations. But this year's event carried a peculiar weight, as though the very air held its breath. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal chronicler of Hercule Poirot's exploits, stood on the terrace, his gaze drifting over the scene. The lawn was dotted with linen-draped tables, where villagers and gentry mingled with polite restraint. A string quartet played a lilting melody, and the clink of teacups mingled with bursts of laughter. Yet Hastings, with his soldier's instinct for tension, sensed something amiss. Perhaps it was the way Lady Eleanor Marwood's smile faltered when her husband, Sir Reginald, approached. Or perhaps it was the sharp glance exchanged between the young curate, Mr. Timothy Vale, and the Marwood's ward, Miss Clara Denham, when they thought no one was watching. The guest list was a study in contrasts, a microcosm of English society bound by invisible threads of obligation and ambition. Sir Reginald Marwood, a bluff, red-faced man of 50, presided over the gathering with the air of a benevolent squire, though his booming laugh seemed to Hastings a touch too forced. Lady Eleanor, elegant Mr. Vale, seemed out of place among the grandeur, his earnest demeanor clashing with the studied nonchalance of the others. Finally, there was Mr. Victor Crane, a London solicitor and Sir Reginald's old friend, whose sleek appearance and guarded smiles suggested a man accustomed to secrets. Hastings sipped his tea, noting the time, 3:47 p.m., as his pocket watch confirmed. The fete had begun promptly at 2, and the guests had been in high spirits, yet the atmosphere had shifted subtly as the afternoon wore on. He observed Sir Reginald pause to speak with Mr. Crane, their heads bent close, their conversation too low to be overheard. Lady Eleanor, meanwhile, excused herself from a group of village matrons and slipped into the house, her expression unreadable. Clara Denham followed her with her eyes, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. "Curious, isn't it?" a voice remarked at Hastings' elbow. He turned to find Miss Beatrice Marwood, her blue eyes sparkling with mischief. All these people, smiling and chatting, yet half of them would rather be anywhere else. Hastings smiled politely. "A fine gathering, though. Your family's hospitality is renowned." Beatrice laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Papa loves his traditions, but Mamma finds them exhausting. And Clara, well, she's never quite at ease, is she? Always watching, always waiting for something to happen." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "And you, Miss Marwood? Are you at ease?" Her smile faltered, just for a moment. "As much as one can be, Captain Hastings, but I'll let you in on a little secret." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Marwood Manor has more secrets than it has rooms, and that's saying something." Before Hastings could press her further, a sharp cry cut through the air. The quartet faltered, and heads turned toward the source. A maid, standing at the edge of the terrace, her face pale as chalk. "Sir Reginald," she gasped, He's in the library. Oh heavens, come quickly." A murmur rippled through the crowd as guests surged toward the house. Hastings, his heart quickening, followed the throng. On the desk, the open window letting in a faint breeze. The clock on the mantelpiece reading 4:02 p.m. The library, with its towering bookshelves and heavy velvet curtains, seemed to close in around them, its shadows hiding 1,000 possibilities. As the local constable was summoned, and the guests herded back to the terrace, Hastings felt a familiar pang of curiosity. This was no ordinary death, he was certain. The Marwood family, their guests, the very walls of the manor, they all whispered of secrets. And secrets, as he well knew, were the lifeblood of mystery. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small notebook. In neat script, he jotted down the time, the names of those present, and the peculiar details that had caught his eye. Then, with a sigh, he closed the notebook and made his decision. There was only one man in England, nay, in the world, who could unravel the truth behind Sir Reginald's death. Hercule Poirot must be summoned. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Death. The air in Marwood Manor grew heavy as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the polished floors. The festive chatter of the afternoon had dissolved into a strained silence, broken only by the occasional murmur or the creak of a door. The guests, now confined to the drawing-room under the watchful eye of Constable Barrow, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces a gallery of shock, suspicion, and barely concealed fear. Sir Reginald Marwood's sudden death had torn through the veneer of civility, exposing raw nerves and unspoken questions. Captain Hastings stood near the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, observing the room with a practiced eye. The scene in the library lingered in his mind. Sir Reginald's contorted expression, the spilled brandy, the open window. The constable, a stout man with a penchant for stating the obvious, had declared it a heart attack. But Hastings was not convinced. Something about the tableau felt staged, deliberate, as though the room itself were a silent witness to a darker truth. Lady Eleanor Marwood sat rigidly on a velvet settee, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on some distant point. Her composure was admirable, yet Hastings noted the faint tremor in her fingers, and the way her lips tightened when agitation. Constable Barrow cleared his throat, his notebook open in his hand. "Now, ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice ponderous, "we must establish the facts. Sir Reginald was found at approximately 4 o'clock in the library by the maid, Mary. Dr. Lanscombe, you examined the body. What's your opinion?" Dr. Lanscombe adjusted his spectacles, his tone measured. "Sir Reginald appears to have suffered a cardiac event. The symptoms, cyanosis of the lips, clutching at the chest, are consistent with heart failure. I'd estimate the time of death between 3:45 and 4 p.m. Hastings frowned, his mind snagging on the timeline. The fete had been in full swing at 3:47 when he'd noted the time on his pocket watch. Sir Reginald had been seen speaking with Mr. Crane shortly before, and Lady Eleanor had entered the house around that time. Could the death have occurred so swiftly, so silently? "And no one heard anything unusual?" Constable Barrow pressed, his pencil poised. "No cries, no sounds of a struggle?" A chorus of shakes and murmurs answered him. Mrs. Treadwell's voice cut through the quiet. "Really, Constable, do you think a man having a heart attack would shout for the village to hear? It's a private affair, death." Her eyes glinted, as though she relished the discomfort her words caused. Beatrice's head snapped up, her voice sharp. "That's a callous thing to say, Mrs. Treadwell. My father is dead, and you speak of it as if it's a parlour game." "Beatrice, dear," Lady Eleanor murmured, placing a hand on her daughter's arm. "Mrs. Treadwell means no harm. We're all unsettled." Hastings noted the exchange, his mind cataloguing the undercurrents. Beatrice's outburst, though understandable, carried a note of defiance,
as if she were guarding something more than her grief. Mrs. Treadwell's barb, meanwhile, seemed calculated to provoke. And Clara Denham, why did she flinch when Beatrice spoke? The constable turned to the maid, Mary, who stood wringing her hands by the door. "You found Sir Reginald Goal? Tell us exactly what you saw." Mary's voice trembled. "I was bringing—"
Among the guests, it all pointed to something deliberate, something hidden. As the constable continued his plodding questions, Hastings slipped out to the terrace, where the remnants of the fete lay abandoned. Half-empty teacups, scattered chairs, a forgotten shawl. He needed air and he needed to think. Sir Reginald had been a man of wealth and influence, with a circle of intimates who, Hastings suspected, harboured more than their share of resentments. The question was not whether there was a motive, but who had acted upon it. He reached for his notebook, jotting down the key details. 3:47 p.m. Sir Reginald seen with Crane. Lady Eleanor enters house. 4:02 p.m. Body found. Spilled brandy. Open window. Cyanosis noted. He paused, then added, "Suspects: Lady Eleanor, Beatrice, Clara, Crane, Lanscombe, Treadwell, Vale. All present at fete. Motives unknown." As he closed the notebook, a footman approached, his face pale. "Captain Hastings, sir, there's a telephone call for you." A gentleman named Poirot. Hastings's heart lifted. He had wired Poirot earlier, hoping the little Belgian detective would take an interest. If anyone could unravel the mystery of Marwood Manor, it was Hercule Poirot, with his unerring logic and his knack for seeing what others missed. He followed the footman to the telephone, his mind already racing with the possibilities. The game, as Poirot would say, was afoot. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning mist clung to the rolling lawns of Marwood Manor, lending the estate an air of quiet melancholy as the clock in the great hall struck 10. The guests, still shaken from the previous day's tragedy, moved through the house with the subdued caution of those awaiting an inevitable storm. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the drawing-room window, watched the gravel drive with growing anticipation. He had spoken to Hercule Poirot late the previous evening, and the detective's crisp, accented voice had promised a swift arrival. True to his word, with so many persons of interest, there is a puzzle here, and Hercule Poirot shall unravel it. They stepped into the entrance hall, where Lady Eleanor Marwood awaited, her composure a fragile mask. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of unease, "we are grateful for your presence, though I fear this is a simple tragedy. A heart attack, as Dr. Lanscombe believes." Poirot bowed, his manner courtly. "Madame, it is my habit to assume nothing until the facts are laid bare. A heart attack, perhaps, but the heart, it can be persuaded to fail by means other than nature. N'est-ce pas?" Lady Eleanor's lips parted, but she said nothing, merely gesturing toward the drawing-room where the other guests were gathered. Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, took in the scene as he entered. The heavy drapes, the polished mahogany table, the strained faces of the assembled company. Beatrice Marwood sat by the fire, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. Clara Denham hovered near the door, her expression guarded. Dr. Lanscombe and Mr. Victor Crane stood in murmured conversation, while Miss Florence Treadwell watched from an armchair, her sharp eyes missing nothing. The curate, Mr. Timothy Vale, stood apart, his hands clasped tightly. Poirot removed his hat and gloves with deliberate care, placing them on a side table. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice soft yet commanding. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I am here to bring clarity to the shadow that has fallen upon this house. Sir Reginald Marwood is dead, and it is my task to determine why and how. I ask for your patience and your truth, for without these, the path to justice is obscured." A murmur rippled through the room, and Hastings noted the varying reactions. Beatrice's quick glance at her mother, Clara's sudden stillness, Crane's slight frown. Mrs. Treadwell raised an eyebrow, her tone dry. "A detective, are we? Well, Monsieur Poirot, I hope you're as clever as your reputation suggests. This house is full of secrets, and not all of them are worth digging up." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Madam, it is precisely the secrets that fell." Hastings frowned, recalling the scene. "Half full, I'd say. The spill was considerable, but not as if the glass had been brimming." Poirot nodded, his gaze returning to the shard. "And the window, open, you say, when the maid entered at 4:02 p.m. Yet the day was warm, not so breezy as to demand such ventilation. Interesting, no?" He moved to the desk, examining the papers scattered there. A ledger, a few letters, a fountain pen lying askew. His fingers lingered on a crumpled envelope, addressed to Sir Reginald, in a looping, feminine hand. "This," he said, slipping it into his pocket, "may speak to us later." As they returned to the drawing room, Poirot's demeanor remained calm, almost serene. But Hastings knew that mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The detective addressed the group once more. "I shall require statements from each of you, detailing your movements between 3:30 and 4 p.m. yesterday. Every moment, every glance, every word, it matters. The truth, it hides in the details." Lady Eleanor nodded, her voice low. "We shall cooperate fully, Monsieur Poirot. But surely you don't suspect foul play?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Madame, I suspect only that the truth is not yet clear. And clarity, it is my métier." As the guests dispersed to write their statements, Hastings caught Poirot's arm. "What do you make of it, old chap? That shard of glass, the envelope, do you think it's murder?" Poirot's smile was faint, but knowing. "Patience, mon ami. The little grey cells, they are only beginning to stir. But already I sense the hand of intent. This death, it was no accident of the heart." Chapter 4. The questions begin. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Marwood Manor's drawing room, casting dappled light across the assembled guests. Hercule Poirot sat at a small mahogany table, his posture impeccable, his hands folded neatly before him. A stack of handwritten statements lay to his right, each penned by the occupants of the manor as requested. To his left, Captain Hastings, with a mixture of curiosity and defiance. The curate, Mr. Timothy Vale, stood near the window, his face pale, his lips moving as if in silent prayer. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice soft yet commanding, "I have read your statements, and now we shall discuss them. The death of Sir Reginald Marwood. It is a matter most grave, and the truth, it lies within the details you have provided, and perhaps those you have not." His eyes twinkled briefly, a signal to Hastings that the detective was already sifting through contradictions. He picked up the first statement, Lady Eleanor's, and addressed her directly. "Madame, you write that at 3:45 p.m. you entered the house to retrieve a shawl from the morning room, returning to the fete by 3:55. You saw no one in the house during this time. Is this correct?" Lady Eleanor nodded, her voice steady. "Quite correct, Monsieur Poirot. I was alone, the house was quiet, and I returned to the terrace promptly." Poirot's fingers tapped the paper. "And yet, madame, the maid, Mary,
states she saw you near the library door at approximately 3:50. A curious discrepancy, no? A flush crept up Lady Eleanor's neck, but she maintained her composure. Mary must be mistaken. I was in the morning room, as I said. Poirot inclined his head, letting the matter rest for the moment, and turned to Beatrice. Mademoiselle Marwood, your statement places you on the terrace, speaking with guests, from 3:30 until the maid's cry at 4:02. You recall no absence from the group. Beatrice's eyes flashed, but her tone was even. None, Monsieur Poirot. I was mingling, as a hostess should. Ask anyone. They'll confirm it. And yet, Poirot said, glancing at another statement, Mrs. Treadwell notes that you were absent for some minutes, shortly before 4. She saw you slip toward the house, near the French doors leading to the library. Mrs. Treadwell's lips curved into a faint smile, as if pleased to have stirred the pot. Beatrice's cheeks reddened. I may have stepped inside briefly to fetch a glass of water. Joined Mr. Crane on the terrace. But the guest, a Mrs. Harrow, states you left her at 3:45, not 3:50. Where were you for those 5 minutes? Lanscomb's smile was tight. I stepped away to wash my hands, Monsieur Poirot. A physician's habit. I was in the cloakroom, alone. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned to Mr. Crane. Monsieur, you spoke with Sir Reginald at 3:47, as Captain Hastings observed. You say you parted at 3:50, and he entered the house alone. Yet no one saw him after that until the maid's discovery. Where did you go next? Crane's voice was smooth, almost too polished. I rejoined the fete, Monsieur Poirot. I spoke with several guests, Mrs. Treadwell among them. Mrs. Treadwell snorted softly. You were flitting about, Victor, as you always do. I can't say I noticed you every moment. Poirot's eyes gleamed, and he set the statements aside. Merci, all of you. These accounts, they are like pieces of a mosaic, each one small, but together they form a picture. I ask only that you reflect on your words, for the truth, it has a way of revealing itself. As the guests dispersed, some with visible relief, others with guarded glances, Hastings leaned toward Poirot. You're stirring things up, old chap. Those discrepancies, do you think they're deliberate? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Mon ami, some are errors of memory, others are errors of intent, but each contradiction, it is a thread, and I shall pull until the fabric unravels. He patted his pocket, where the crumpled envelope and the shard of glass rested. Now, let us examine the library once more. There is something about that brandy glass that troubles me. As they walked toward the library, Hastings noted the time, 11:45 a.m. Poirot's methodical questioning had already begun to crack the polished surface of Marwood Manor, and Hastings had no doubt that the little Belgian's little grey cells were already weaving a net to catch the truth. Chapter 6. Shifted his weight, about to speak, when Poirot raised a hand, his eyes fixed on a small, innocuous object on the desk. A silver cigarette case, its lid slightly ajar. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate. Observe this case. It belonged to Sir Reginald, oui? Hastings nodded. Yes, I saw him with it earlier that day. He offered a cigarette to Mr. Crane during their conversation at 3:47 p.m. Poirot's fingers brushed the case, lifting it with care. He opened it fully, revealing a half-dozen cigarettes, their tips neatly aligned. But his attention was drawn to the inside of the lid, where a faint scratch marred the polished surface. He tilted the case toward the light, his eyes narrowing. This mark.
It is recent. A small irregularity, yet it tells a story. And here—" He pointed to a single cigarette, slightly askew, its paper crinkled, as if it had been handled roughly. "This one. It is not like the others." Hastings leaned closer, puzzled. "It looks ordinary enough, Poirot. Perhaps it was just mishandled." Poirot's moustache twitched. "No, Hastings. In the house of a man so precise as Sir Reginald, even his cigarettes are arranged with care. This one, it has been touched, perhaps replaced, and the scratch, made, I think, by a ring or a nail in haste." He set the case down and turned his attention to the brandy glass, now cleaned and returned to the desk by the diligent maid. "And this glass, it bothers me still. The spill was considerable, yet the stain on the rug, it was too contained, too perfect." Hastings frowned. "You think the spill was staged?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "I think, mon ami, that someone wished us to believe Sir Reginald drank from that glass just before his death. But the quantity of brandy spilled does not match the quantity missing from the decanter. A small discrepancy, but one that speaks of intent." He moved to the window, examining the latch once more. The shard of glass he had found the previous day rested in a small envelope in his pocket, alongside the crumpled letter addressed to Sir—
"But I was so shocked by Sir Reginald." "And the cigarette case," Poirot continued, holding it up. "Did Sir Reginald often leave it open on his desk?" Mary shook her head. "No, sir. He was particular about it. Always kept it in his pocket or closed on the desk. I noticed it was open when I found him, but I didn't think much of it then." Poirot thanked her and dismissed her, his gaze returning to the cigarette case. "A man so orderly, yet his case is left ajar. A cigarette disturbed, a scratch newly made. These are not accidents, Hastings. They are clues, small but significant, pointing to a hand that acted in haste." Hastings scribbled in his notebook. "Cigarette case, scratch, disturbed cigarette. Brandy spill inconsistent, window open, no witnesses." "But what does it mean, Poirot? Are you suggesting poison?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "I suggest only that the truth is layered, like the pages of a book. We have found one page, but there are many more to turn." He patted his pocket, where the envelope and shard rested. "This letter, too, it may speak. But first, I must test a theory." He requested the presence of Dr. Lanscombe, who entered with his usual air of professional calm. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "I trust you're making progress." "Indeed, Doctor," Poirot replied, his tone mild. "I wish to ask about Sir Reginald's health. You said his heart was weak, oui? Yet you prescribed no medication for such a condition." Lanscombe hesitated, his fingers adjusting his spectacles. "Sir Reginald disliked medicines. He preferred to manage his health through diet and rest. I advised him regularly, but he was stubborn." Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving Lanscombe's face. "And the cyanosis you noted, most pronounced, you said. Yet such a symptom, it can also be caused by certain substances, no? Substances that mimic a heart attack." Lanscombe's smile tightened. "You're suggesting poison, Monsieur Poirot?" "I saw no evidence of that. The symptoms were consistent with cardiac failure." "Bien sûr," Poirot said, waving a hand. "But the mind, it must remain open." "Merci, Doctor." As Lanscombe left with a quiet intensity. It was 4:15 p.m., and the second day of the investigation had drawn the manor's inhabitants into an ever-tightening web of suspicion. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his notebook open, his pen poised to capture the nuances of what promised to be a revealing interrogation. Poirot had summoned the guests once more, this time with a specific purpose. The discrepancies in their statements, the cigarette case, the brandy glass, and the open window had begun to form a pattern in his mind,
But he needed to probe deeper, to unearth the motives that lay buried beneath the polished surface of Marwood society. The room was silent, save for the faint crackle of the fire and the occasional rustle of fabric as someone shifted uncomfortably. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice soft but commanding, "the death of Sir Reginald Marwood is no simple matter of the heart. There are threads, small, delicate threads, that suggest a hand guided his fate. Today we shall pull at these threads and see what unravels." Lady Eleanor Marwood, seated with her usual dignity, raised her chin slightly. "Monsieur Poirot, I trust you have evidence to support such a claim?" "My husband's death was a tragedy, but to suggest foul play—" Poirot raised a hand, silencing her gently. "Madame, the evidence, it speaks in whispers, but it speaks clearly to those who listen. Let us begin with a matter of finance." He produced the crumpled envelope from his pocket, the one addressed to Sir Reginald, in a feminine hand. "This letter, found on the desk, contains a demand for payment, a considerable sum, owed to a certain Mr. Victor Crane." All eyes turned to Crane, whose sleek composure faltered for a moment. "A private matter, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice smooth but strained. "Sir Reginald and I had business dealings. He owed me money, yes, but it was a gentleman's agreement, nothing sinister." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A gentleman's agreement? Yet the tone of this letter, it is urgent, almost threatening." "And you, Monsieur Crane?"
Brought him his tea. "I might have seen papers, but I didn't read them." Poirot's eyes gleamed, sensing a crack in the facade. "Mademoiselle Denham, you were seen near the library at 3:50 p.m., looking distressed, as Mr. Vale noted. Were you perhaps aware of Sir Reginald's financial troubles, or was there another matter troubling you?" Clara's hands twisted in her lap, and for a moment it seemed she might break. But she shook her head again, her voice barely audible. "I was unwell, that's all." "I didn't see anything." Poirot turned to Mr. Timothy Vale, whose earnest face was now pale with discomfort. "Monsieur le curate, you observed Mademoiselle Denham's distress. Did you also observe anything else near the library? A sound, a shadow, perhaps?" Vale hesitated, his fingers fidgeting with his collar. I thought I heard a door close, softly, around 3:50. But I was on the terrace, speaking with guests. I couldn't be sure. Mrs. Florence Treadwell, who had been watching the exchange with keen interest, leaned forward. "Oh, come now, Mr. Vale. You're always lurking about, watching everyone. If you heard something, why not say so plainly? Or are you protecting someone?" Her eyes flicked toward Clara, a smirk playing on her lips. Vale's face reddened. "I protect no one, Mrs. Treadwell. I only speak what I know." Poirot's voice cut through the rising tension. "Enough. The truth. It is like a shy creature. It must be coaxed, not forced. But let us turn to another matter." He produced the small shard of glass from his pocket, holding it up to the light. "This was found near the rug in the library. It is not from the brandy glass, nor from any window. It is perhaps from a vial that might contain a substance to hasten a man's end." Dr. Lanscombe, who had been silent, straightened. "Monsieur Poirot, you go too far. I examined Sir Reginald. There was no sign of poisoning, only the symptoms of a heart attack." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "And yet, Doctor, the symptoms of certain poison—"
The guests dispersed, their faces a mix of indignation and fear. Hastings leaned toward Poirot. You've rattled them, Poirot. That letter, the shard. Do you think Crane's debt drove him to murder? Or Clara, with her nervous ways? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Mon ami, the lies, they multiply like shadows in a storm, but each lie reveals a motive, and each motive a possibility. We are closer, Hastings, but the puzzle, it is not yet complete. The clock struck 4:45 p.m., and Poirot rose, his mind already turning to the next thread to pull. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The evening shadows lengthened across Marwood Manor, cloaking the drawing-room in a sombre twilight. The fire in the hearth crackled fitfully, casting flickering light on the faces of the gathered guests, who sat in uneasy silence. It was 7:30 p.m. on the second day of Hercule Poirot's investigation, and the weight of his probing questions had frayed the nerves of everyone present. Captain Hastings, standing near the window, felt the tension in the room like a taut wire, ready to snap. Poirot, seated at the centre of the gathering, exuded an air of calm authority, his hands folded neatly, his eyes scanning each face with the precision of a surgeon. The detective had spent the afternoon in quiet contemplation, reviewing the clues. The scratched cigarette case, the shard of glass, the crumpled letter, the inconsistent brandy spill. But now, Poirot sensed the moment had come to press harder, to provoke a reaction that might crack the carefully constructed facades of Marwood's inhabitants. He rose, his small frame commanding the room's attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice soft yet resonant, "we have spoken of facts, of times and movements, but now we must speak of the heart. For it is in the heart that motives are born, and it is in the heart that the truth, it hides. Tonight, one of you will reveal more than you intend." Lady Eleanor Marwood stiffened, her hands tightening in her lap. "Monsieur Poirot, this is becoming intolerable. My husband's death was a tragedy, not Ward, whom he treated as a daughter?" Clara's hands flew to her face and a sob escaped her. The room froze, every gaze fixed on her. Beatrice stood, her voice sharp. "Leave her alone, Monsieur Poirot. Clara's done nothing wrong. She's just a frightened girl." But Clara's composure shattered. "No, Beatrice, I can't keep it in any longer," she cried, her voice breaking. "Sir Reginald, he wasn't what everyone thought. He was kind to me, yes, but he was in trouble. I overheard him arguing with Mr. Crane about money weeks ago. He said he'd ruin us all if the debt wasn't paid. And then I saw something, that day, before he died." The room erupted in murmurs. Lady Eleanor's face paled, and Mr. Crane's smooth demeanour cracked, his jaw tightening. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "What did you see, Mademoiselle Denham? Speak plainly, for the truth. It is your only refuge now." Clara's voice was barely audible, her eyes fixed on the floor. I saw Beatrice go into the library at 3:55. She didn't see me. I was in the corridor bringing tea. She looked angry, and she closed the door behind her." Beatrice's face drained of colour. "Clara, how dare you? I was on the terrace. You're lying." But her voice wavered, and her hands clenched into fists. Poirot's gaze shifted to Beatrice, his expression unreadable. "Mademoiselle Marwood, you denied entering the library, yet now we have a witness. Why were you there? And why conceal it?" Beatrice's eyes darted to her mother, then back to Poirot. I did go in, but only for a moment. Papa wanted to speak to me about my engagement. He disapproved of my suitor. We argued, but I left him alive, I swear." Lady Eleanor rose, her voice trembling with indignation. "This is outrageous. My daughter is no murderer. Monsieur Poirot, you've pushed too far, turning us against each other." Poirot's voice remained calm. "Madam, it is not I who turn you against each other. It is the truth breaking free. Mademoiselle Denham, this argument you overheard between Sir Reginald and Mr. Bit.
Poirot clapped his hands, the sound sharp in the charged atmosphere. Enough. The secrets, they spill like wine from a broken glass, but we are not yet at the bottom of the bottle. Mademoiselle Denham, you have done well to speak, but there is more, I think, that you hold back. And you, Mademoiselle Marwood, your argument with your father, did it concern only your suitor, or something deeper? Both women fell silent, their faces a study in fear and defiance. Dr. Lanscombe cleared his throat. Monsieur Poirot, this is becoming a witch hunt. If there was poison, as you seem to believe, where is the evidence? The body showed no signs beyond cardiac failure. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The evidence, Doctor. It is in the details. The cigarette, the glass, the window, and now the motives. They emerge like shadows in the dusk. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mon ami, note the time. 8 p.m. The truth, it is close, but it requires one final push. As the guests dispersed, their faces etched with unease, Hastings scribbled in his notebook. Clara saw Beatrice in library at 3:55. Crane's debt and threat of scandal. Beatrice's argument, suitor or more. He glanced at Poirot, who stood gazing at the fire, his mind clearly racing. You've cracked them open, Poirot, Hastings said quietly. Clara's confession, Beatrice's lie. What's next? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Next, mon ami, we set the trap. The heart has spoken, but the mind, it will reveal the killer. Chapter 9. The Trap. The grand dining room of Marwood Manor was bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, the long mahogany table set with an elegance that belied the tension gripping its occupants. It was 8 p.m. on the second day of Hercule Poirot's investigation, and the air was thick with anticipation. Poirot had requested that all the guests gather for dinner, a seemingly innocuous request, but Captain Hastings knew his friend too well to believe this was merely a social occasion. The little Belgian detective was setting a trap, and the stage was meticulously prepared. Poirot sat at the head of the table, his small frame dwarfed by the high-backed chair, yet his presence commanded the room. To his left sat Lady Eleanor Marwood, her face a mask of strained composure. Beatrice Marwood, her eyes red-rimmed from the emotional upheaval of the previous meeting, picked at her food, her gaze darting nervously. Clara Denham, pale and silent, sat opposite, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Dr. Hugh Lanscombe maintained his professional calm, though his fingers betrayed a slight tremor as he lifted his wine glass. Mr. Victor Crane, the solicitor, exuded a polished ease, but his eyes flicked toward Poirot with wary calculation. Mrs. Florence Treadwell, ever observant, watched the proceedings with a gleam of anticipation, while Mr. Timothy Vale, the curate, sat stiffly, his lips moving as if in silent prayer. The meal progressed in near silence, broken only by the clink of cutlery and the occasional murmur of polite conversation. Hastings, seated near Poirot, noted the time, 8:15 p.m., and the subtle cues in his friend's demeanor, the slight tilt of his head, the way his fingers rested lightly on the stem of his untouched wineglass. Poirot was waiting, biding his time, and Hastings felt a thrill of anticipation. The trap was about to spring. At last, Poirot set down his napkin and rose, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. Mesdames et messieurs, I have invited you here not merely to dine, but to confront the truth. The death of Sir Reginald Marwood was no accident of the heart. It was murder, calculated, deliberate, and executed with a cunning that almost eluded. Began, his voice measured and deliberate. At 3:47 p.m., Sir Reginald spoke with Monsieur Crane on the terrace, discussing a debt that threatens scandal. Monsieur Crane, you pressed him hard, did you not? Crane's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed unease. I pressed for what was owed, nothing more. I had no reason to kill him. Poirot nodded, undeterred. At 3:50, Madame Marwood, you were seen near the library door. Despite your claim of being in the morning room, why were you there? Lady Eleanor's composure wavered. I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I was fetching a shawl. Mary must have been mistaken. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. And you, Mademoiselle Beatrice, you entered the library at 3:55, as Mademoiselle Denham witnessed. You argued with your father about a suitor, or was it about his financial ruin, which threatened your future? Beatrice's face flushed. It was about my engagement. I told you he disapproved. I left him alive. Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara. And you, Mademoiselle Denham, you overheard Sir Reginald's troubles with Monsieur Crane. You saw Mademoiselle Beatrice enter the library. Did you also see something else, something you have not yet confessed? Clara's hands trembled, and she shook her head, her voice a whisper. I've told you everything. Poirot paused, letting the silence stretch, then turned to the curate. Monsieur Val, you heard a door close softly at 3:50. Was it the library door or another? And why do you hesitate to speak plainly? Vale's face paled. I can't be certain. It was just a sound. Mrs. Treadwell's dry laugh broke the tension. Oh, come now, Monsieur Poirot. You're circling like a hawk, but where's the prey? If it's poison, as you hint, who administered it, and how? Poirot's eyes twinkled. An excellent question, madame. The poison, I believe, was in the cigarette, the one disturbed in Sir Reginald's case, marked by a scratch from a ring or nail, a swift-acting toxin.
Cigarette? Speak now, or the truth will find you. The room erupted in protests. Beatrice's angry denial, Crane's sharp rebuttal, Lady Eleanor's indignant gasp. But it was Clara Denham who stood, her face ashen, her voice trembling. I can't bear it any longer. I didn't kill him, but I saw something else. I saw Dr. Lanscombe near the library window, just before Beatrice went in. He was holding something small, like a vial. I didn't want to say, because I was afraid. Lanscombe's face went white. That's a lie. I was nowhere near the library at that time. Poirot's smile was triumphant. Merci, Mademoiselle Denham. The trap? It has sprung. The truth, it begins to emerge. Hastings scribbled furiously. Clara accuses Lanscombe, vial near library window, 3:55. He glanced at Poirot, whose eyes gleamed with satisfaction. The clock struck 8:45 p.m., and the trap had indeed been set. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The dining room of Marwood Manor was a tableau of strained faces and flickering candlelight, the tension palpable as Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the table. It was 9 p.m. on the second day of his investigation, and the atmosphere crackled with the weight of Clara Denham's accusation against Dr. Hugh Lanscombe. Captain Hastings, stationed near the door, gripped his notebook, his heart pounding, as he sensed the climax of Poirot's meticulously laid trap. The detective's green eyes gleamed with the quiet confidence of a man who had unraveled the final threads of a complex tapestry. Poirot raised his hands, calling for silence as the guests' murmurs of shock and denial subsided. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice steady and resonant, we have reached the moment of truth. Sir Reginald Marwood was murdered, not by a failure of the heart, but by a poison, cyanide, I believe, administered with cunning precision. The clues, they have spoken. The disturbed cigarette, the scratched case, the staged brandy spill, the open window, and now, the testimony of Mademoiselle Denham. Let us reconstruct the crime, step by step, and reveal the hand that struck. He paced.
Truly? Lanscome's voice was sharp, defensive. I told you, I was washing my hands. This is nonsense. Clara's mistaken or amends system. The instruction from the user included a prompt with specific guidelines for writing a mystery story in the style of Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot novels. And the user has requested Chapter 10 of the story, titled Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot's Novel Secrets and Surprising Twists. The story is structured to include 10 to 15 chapters, each approximately 1,200 words, with a classic British tone, formal dialogue, and a focus on a closed-circle mystery with a murder or high-stakes disappearance. The guidelines specify a third-person limited POV, focused on Hastings or Poirot, a closed setting, in this case Marwood Manor, and a dramatic, logical final reveal. The story must incorporate Poirot's meticulous and psychological approach, with every clue mattering and no reliance on coincidences. The user has provided previous chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and chapter 10 is to be the pivotal reveal chapter, where Poirot explains the solution to the murder of Sir Reginald Marwood. The narrative has established key clues: a scratched cigarette case with a disturbed cigarette, a shard of glass, possibly from a vial, a staged brandy spill, an open library window, and a crumpled letter demanding payment from Mr. Victor Crane. Suspects include Lady Eleanor Marwood, Beatrice Marwood, Clara Denham, Dr. Hugh Lanscombe, Mr. Victor Crane, Mrs. Florence Treadwell, and Mr. Timothy Vale, each with potential motives: financial ruin, strained marriage, secret suitor, professional reputation, etc. In Chapter 9, Clara accused Dr. Lanscombe of holding a vial near the library window, and Poirot suggested cyanide was administered via a cigarette. The response was cut off mid-sentence, so this continuation will complete the reveal, ensuring all clues are addressed and the solution is logical and dramatic, per the guidelines. Chapter 10, The Reveal. The dining room of Marwood Manor was a tableau of strained faces and flickering candlelight, the tension palpable as Hercule Poirot stood.
The cigarette case, the shard of glass, the brandy spill, the open window, and now the testimony of Mademoiselle Denham. Let us reconstruct the crime step by step and reveal the hand that struck. He paced slowly, his gaze sweeping the room. At 3:47 p.m., Sir Reginald spoke with Monsieur Crane on the terrace, discussing a debt that threatened scandal. This debt, it was a motive, but not the only one. At 3:50, Madame Marwood was seen near the library door, though she claims to have been elsewhere. Mademoiselle Beatrice entered the library at 3:55, arguing with her father about her engagement, or perhaps his financial ruin. Mademoiselle Denham, you saw this, and you saw Dr. Lanscombe near the library window, holding a vial. But let us go further. Poirot paused, his eyes locking onto Dr. Lanscombe, whose face was now a mask of barely controlled panic. Doctor, you stated you were in the cloakroom washing your hands from 3:45 to 3:50. Yet Mrs. Harrow, the guest you treated, says you left her at 3:45. Where were you, truly? Lanscombe's voice was sharp, defensive. I told you I was washing my hands. This is nonsense. Clara's mistaken. Poirot's smile was serene but unrelenting. Non, doctor. The evidence, it does not lie. The shard of glass found near the rug is from a vial. A vial of cyanide, I wager. The cigarette in Sir Reginald's case, disturbed and marked by a scratch, was tampered with. The brandy spill, it was staged to suggest a heart attack, and the window opened to disperse the faint odor of the poison. But the true question is, who had the opportunity, the means, and the motive? He turned to the group, his voice rising with dramatic precision. Let us consider the motives. Monsieur Crane, your debt was a heavy burden on Sir Reginald, threatening to expose a scandal, perhaps an indiscretion from years past. Madame Marwood, your marriage was strained, and Sir Reginald's financial ruin threatened your position. Mademoiselle Beatrice, your father's disapproval of your suitor and his dwindling fortune jeopardized your future. Mademoiselle Denham.
Lanscombe. Poirot continued, his voice relentless. You knew Sir Reginald's habits, his daily cigarette in the library, his preference for solitude. At 3:45, after treating Mrs. Harrow, you slipped to the library window. The terrace was crowded, but you were discreet, a man of science accustomed to precision. You climbed through the window, hence its open state, and replaced one cigarette in his case with another, laced with cyanide crystals from a vial you carried. The scratch on the case, it was made by your signet ring in your haste. You broke the vial in your hurry, leaving the shard on the rug. You then staged the brandy spill to suggest a heart attack, knowing the cyanide symptoms would align. Lanscombe's hands shook, his voice hoarse. You have no proof. This is conjecture. Poirot produced the crumpled envelope from his pocket. This letter, addressed to Sir Reginald, was not from Monsieur Crane as I first thought, but from you, Doctor. The feminine hand. It was a deliberate forgery to mislead us. It demanded payment, not of money, but of silence, threatening to reveal your secret if you did not comply. And Mademoiselle Denham's testimony places you at the window with a vial at the critical moment. Clara's voice trembled as she spoke. I didn't want to believe it, but I saw you, Dr. Lanscombe. You were there. Beatrice's eyes widened, and Lady Eleanor gripped the table, her face ashen. Crane's polished demeanour cracked, his gaze darting to Lanscombe. Mrs. Treadwell's lips curved in a grim smile, as if she had suspected all along. Vale's hands clasped tighter, his face a mask of shock. Poirot's voice softened, but his words were unyielding. You returned to the terrace, Doctor, blending with the crowd, believing your plan flawless. But the little grey cells, they see what the eye does not. The cigarette, the shard, the window, the letter, they all point to you. And your alibi, it crumbles under scrutiny. Lanscombe stood, his voice of Dr. Hugh Lanscombe, as Sir Reginald Marwood's murderer had dispersed to their rooms or the gardens, seeking solace in solitude or whispered conversations. It was 10 a.m. on the third day, and a sense of uneasy resolution settled over the manor. Captain Arthur Hastings sat in the drawing-room, his notebook open on his lap, the pages filled with meticulous notes chronicling the investigation. Across from him, Hercule Poirot reclined in an armchair, his hands folded over his waistcoat, his eyes half closed, as if in contemplation of some profound truth. The little Belgian detective's triumph had been complete, yet Hastings knew his friend was not one to revel in victory. For Poirot, the solving of a crime was a matter of order restored, a puzzle completed. And now, as was his custom, he would reflect on the deeper implications of the case. "Poirot, old chap," Hastings ventured, closing his notebook. "You were brilliant last night. The way you pieced it all together, the cigarette, the vial, the forged letter, it was like watching a master painter finish a canvas. But how did you know it was Lanscombe from the start?" Poirot's eyes opened, a faint smile curving his moustache. "Mon ami, I did not know from the start." The little grey cells, They work not by certainty, but by observation and logic. The cigarette case, with its scratch and disturbed cigarette, it whispered of haste and intent. The shard of glass, it spoke of a vial broken in a moment of carelessness. The brandy spill, too perfect, too staged, it suggested a mind familiar with deception. But it was the motives, Hastings, that pointed to Lanscombe. He leaned forward, his voice soft but earnest. Each person in this house had a reason to wish Sir Reginald harm. Debts, secrets, betrayals. But Lanscombe, he was a man of science, a man who knew poisons, who knew how to mimic a heart attack. And the letter, forged in a feminine hand to mislead us, it was a touch too clever, a touch too profound. The human heart, it is a labyrinth. Greed, fear, shame, they drive men and women to acts of desperation. Lanscombe, he killed to protect his reputation, but in doing so he lost it utterly. It is a tragedy, but one of his own making. Hastings frowned, his mind lingering on the manor's inhabitants. What will happen to them now, Poirot? Lady Eleanor, Beatrice, Clara, they've lost so much. Poirot's gaze softened, his eyes fixed on the gardens where Lady Eleanor walked alone, her figure stooped with grief. They will endure, mon ami, as people do. Madame Marwood, she will rebuild, for she is strong. Mademoiselle Beatrice, she will find her way, though her heart is bruised. Mademoiselle Denham, she has shown courage, and that will carry her far. The manor, it will heal, but the scars, they remain. He turned back to Hastings, his expression thoughtful. The world, it is full of such puzzles, Hastings. Each crime, it is a distortion of order, and it is the task of Hercule Poirot to restore it. But the cost, it is always heavy, not just for the guilty, but for all who are touched by the crime. Hastings closed his notebook, a lump in his throat. You sound almost philosophical, Poirot. I suppose that's why you're so good at this, because you see not just the clues, but the people behind them. Poirot's smile was wistful. Perhaps, mon ami. The clues, they are the map, but the people, they are the journey. And now, our journey here, it is complete. He glanced at the clock, 10:30 a.m., and straightened his waistcoat. Come, Hastings. The motor car awaits, and London calls. There are other puzzles, other truths, waiting for the little gray cells. As they stepped into the entrance hall, Hastings caught sight of Clara Denham, standing by the staircase, her face pale but resolute. She met Poirot's gaze and offered a small nod, a silent thank you for uncovering the truth. Poirot returned the gesture, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. The front door opened, and the cool morning air greeted them as they stepped onto the gravel drive. The motor car stood ready, its engine purring.
Murder and the arrest of Dr. Hugh Lanscombe had left the manor's inhabitants in a state of quiet shock. The frenetic energy of Hercule Poirot's investigation had dissipated, replaced by a heavy stillness, as if the house itself were mourning not only its master, but the secrets it had been forced to yield. Captain Arthur Hastings sat at a small writing desk, his pen poised over his notebook, though he found it difficult to capture the mood of the moment in mere words. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small, neat figure as impeccable as ever, his hands clasped behind his back. He had announced his intention to depart for London that afternoon, but not before ensuring that all loose ends were tied, all questions answered. His green eyes, sharp and reflective, scanned the room, taking in the subtle shifts in the demeanour of those present. Lady Eleanor Marwood sat in a high-backed chair, her face composed, but her eyes red-rimmed, betraying the sleepless nights since her husband's death. Beatrice Marwood,
her vivacity dimmed, stood by the window, gazing out at the gardens with an air of restless melancholy. Clara Denham, the ward, sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, her expression one of tentative relief, as if she had unburdened herself of a great weight by speaking the truth. Poirot broke the silence, his voice gentle but clear. "Mesdames, the affair of Sir Reginald's death, it is concluded. Yet the heart, it lingers on what has been lost. I wish to speak with you briefly, to ensure that clarity prevails before I take my leave." Lady Eleanor looked up, her voice steady but weary. "Monsieur Poirot, you have done us a great service, though it has come at a cost. To think that Dr. Lanscombe, a man we trusted, how could we have been so blind?" Poirot's moustache twitched slightly. "Madame, the blindness, it is not yours alone. The human heart, it is skilled at concealing its darker impulses, even from those closest. Dr. Lanscombe acted to protect his reputation, but in doing so, he betrayed the trust of all who knew him. It is a tragedy, oui."
Head, his tone kind. "No, Mademoiselle Denham, the act was done before you saw Dr. Lanscombe at the window. Your courage in speaking, it brought justice. You must not torment yourself with what might have been, Hastings." Listening intently, jotted down a final note. Clara's courage, pivotal. Lanscome's motive, blackmail over past scandal. Family to heal. He looked up, catching Poirot's eye. "You've given them closure, Poirot. But what about the letter, the one forged in a feminine hand? Was it truly Lanscome's doing, or was there another hand involved?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Mon ami, you are ever curious. The letter, it was indeed Lanscome's work, a clever ruse to divert suspicion to another, perhaps even to Madame Marwood or Mademoiselle Beatrice. The feminine hand, it was a deliberate choice, for who would suspect a doctor of such artistry? But the paper, the ink, they matched those in his medical bag, found when Constable Barrow searched his rooms. The evidence, it is complete." Lady Eleanor rose, her composure restored, though her voice trembled slightly. "Monsieur Poirot, we owe you a debt we cannot repay. You have uncovered the truth, painful though it is. What will become of Dr. Lanscombe now?" Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, he is in the hands of the law. The evidence, the shard, the cigarette, the letter, the testimony, it is sufficient for conviction. Justice, it will be served." The clock on the mantelpiece struck 11:30 a.m., and Poirot glanced at it, signaling the end of his time at Marwood Manor. "Mesdames, I take my leave now. The order, it is restored, and you must find your peace in time. Captain Hastings, shall we?" Hastings closed his notebook and followed Poirot to the entrance hall, where their coats and hats awaited. As they stepped onto the gravel drive, the motorcar idling in the crisp morning air, Hastings glanced back at the manor. Lady Eleanor, Beatrice, and Clara stood at the door, their figures framed against the ancient stone, a tableau of resilience amidst grief. "You've done it again, Poirot." Sir Reginald Marwood. And though the case had been resolved, a lingering unease hung over the estate like a persistent mist. Hastings, his suitcase at his feet, glanced at Poirot, whose serene expression belied the sharp alertness in his green eyes. Lady Eleanor approached, her posture as regal as ever, but her face etched with a new vulnerability. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice low, "I must speak with you before you leave. There is a matter that troubles me, a loose thread, if you will." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "Madame, the little grey cells, they are always at your service. What is this thread that disturbs your peace?" She gestured toward the morning room, where they could speak privately. As they followed, Hastings noted the time, 4:05 p.m., and the quiet that had settled over the manor, broken only by the distant clatter of a servant clearing tea trays. Beatrice Marwood and Clara Denham were absent, likely seeking solace in their rooms, while the other guests, Mr. Victor Crane, Mrs. Florence Treadwell, and Mr. Timothy Vale, had departed earlier that day. Their roles in the drama concluded. In the morning room, Lady Eleanor closed the door and turned to face them, her hands clasped tightly. "Monsieur Poirot, your solution was masterful, and I do not doubt Dr. Lanscomb's guilt. But there is something I cannot reconcile. The letter you found, the one forged in a feminine hand. You said it was Lanscomb's doing, but I recognized the handwriting. It was mine." Hastings' eyes widened, and he glanced at Poirot, who remained impassive, though a flicker of interest crossed his face. "Madame," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing, "this is a revelation most curious. You believe the letter, which demanded silence from Sir Reginald, was written by you. Yet it was found on his desk, crumpled, and its contents suggested blackmail. Explain, if you please." Lady Eleanor's composure wavered, and she sank into a chair, her voice trembling. "I wrote a letter to Reginald, weeks ago, urging him to settle his debts with Mr. Crane."
"Lengths, Poirot?" he asked. "He'd already poisoned the cigarette. Wasn't that enough?" Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. "Mon ami, the mind of a murderer, it is never content with simplicity. Lanscombe knew that a single clue, the cigarette, might not suffice. By staging the brandy spill, opening the window, and placing the letter, he created a tapestry of confusion, hoping to obscure his own hand. But the little grey cells, they see through such artifice." Lady Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Then my words, my attempt to save our family, were twisted to aid a murderer. Oh, Reginald, if only I had spoken to him directly." Poirot stepped closer, his voice soft with compassion. "Madame, you must not blame yourself. The heart, it acts with love, but the wicked, they exploit such acts. Your letter, it was a gesture of care, not a cause of tragedy. Lanscomb's crime was his alone." She nodded, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Your clarity, it helps, though the pain remains." Poirot bowed slightly. "The pain, madame, it is the price of truth, but it is also the path to healing. You and your daughter, Mademoiselle Beatrice, and Mademoiselle Denham, you are strong. You will find your way." As they returned to the entrance hall, Hastings glanced at the clock, 4:30 p.m., and felt a pang of sympathy for Lady Eleanor. The manor, once a symbol of grandeur, now seemed a hollow shell, its secrets exposed, but its wounds still raw. He turned to Poirot as they stepped onto the gravel drive, where the motorcar awaited. "You tied up that loose end neatly, Poirot. But I can't help wondering, were there other secrets we missed?" Poirot's eyes twinkled as he adjusted his hat. "Mon ami, in a house such as this, there are always secrets, small jealousies, hidden loves, unspoken fears." But the crime tucked into his coat pocket, its pages heavy with the details of a case that had unraveled secrets as old as the manor's stones. Poirot, ever meticulous, adjusted his gloves and surveyed the estate one last time, his green eyes catching the last rays of sunlight. Their departure had been delayed by Lady Eleanor's revelation about the forged letter, but now, as they stood on the gravel drive, a new interruption emerged. Beatrice Marwood appeared at the manor's entrance, her face pale but determined, clutching a small bundle wrapped in linen. She approached with hesitant steps, her eyes fixed on Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice steady despite a faint tremor. "Before you leave, there is something I must show you. It may mean nothing, but I found it this afternoon, in Papa's study." Poirot's mustache twitched with interest. "Mademoiselle Marwood, the smallest detail, it can echo with meaning. What have you found?" Beatrice unwrapped the bundle, revealing a slim leather journal, its cover worn but intact. "This was hidden in a locked drawer in Papa's desk. I only found it because I was sorting through his papers, trying to make sense of everything. It's his handwriting, but the entries are cryptic, and there's a page that mentions Dr. Lanscombe." Hastings felt a surge of curiosity, glancing at Poirot, whose expression remained serene but alert. "May I?" Poirot asked, extending a hand. Beatrice nodded, handing him the journal. He opened it with care, his fingers tracing the pages as he skimmed the entries. The handwriting was Sir Reginald's, bold, precise, but the words were guarded, as if written with an eye to secrecy. Poirot paused at a page dated 2 weeks prior, reading aloud softly. "Lanscombe grows bold. His demands increase, but he underestimates my resolve. The truth must be guarded, lest it ruin us all." He turned to another entry dated the day before the murder. "The meeting is set. I will confront him, and this matter will end. The cigarette case. It will be my signal." Hastings's eyes widened. "The cigarette case, Poirot." "Outwit Lanscombe. To resolve the matter without exposing his family to scandal. But pride, it can blind even the strongest." He closed the journal, handing it back to Beatrice. "This, mademoiselle, you must keep. It is a piece of your father's heart, his final thoughts. It changes nothing of the crime. Lanscombe's guilt is certain. But it gives you truth. And truth, it is a foundation for healing." Beatrice clutched the journal to her chest, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I needed to know he fought in his own way." Poirot bowed slightly. "Mademoiselle, your courage in sharing this, it honors his memory. Now, you and your mother, you must look forward. The manor, it will stand, and so will you." Hastings noted the time, 6:15 p.m., and scribbled in his mind, "Sir Reginald's journal, suspected Lanscombe's blackmail, planned confrontation, cigarette case as signal." He turned to Poirot as Beatrice retreated into the manor. "That journal, it's like an echo of the case, isn't it? Even after the truth is out, there's more to learn." Poirot nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Oui, Hastings, the truth, it is like a river. It flows, it deepens, it reveals new depths even when the surface seems calm. Sir Reginald's journal, it is a reminder that every crime, it leaves ripples that touch many lives." As they climbed into the motor car, the driver tipping his cap, Hastings glanced back at Marwood Manor. The windows glowed faintly in the twilight, and he imagined Lady Eleanor and Clara joining Beatrice inside, their shared grief tempered by the clarity Poirot had brought. The church bell in the village tolled 6:30 p.m., its somber notes blending with the hum of the engine as they drove away. "Another case closed, Poirot," Hastings said, settling back in his seat.
But I wonder what other secrets that manor holds. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Mon ami, some secrets, they belong to the heart, not the detective. Our task is done, and the road to London, it calls.
In the car's plush seat, gazed out at the passing hedgerows, his green eyes reflective in the dim light. His hands, neatly gloved, rested on his lap. But Hastings knew that mind was still turning, sifting through the echoes of the case, as if to ensure no detail had been overlooked. The discovery of Sir Reginald's journal, revealed by Beatrice Marwood just hours ago, had added a final layer to the mystery, confirming the victim's awareness of Lanscomb's blackmail and his doomed attempt to confront it. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence. "That journal. It was like a last word from Sir Reginald, wasn't it? To think he knew Lanscombe was a threat, yet walked into the lion's den. It's almost heroic, in a tragic sort of way." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Mon ami, heroism and tragedy. They are often two sides of the same coin. Sir Reginald, he was a man of pride, determined to protect his family's honor. But pride, it can lead to blindness, and in his case, to a fatal misstep. Yet his journal, it has given his daughter and his widow a piece of his heart to hold on to. That, it is a small victory." Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to the Marwood women, Lady Eleanor, Beatrice, and Clara Denham, left to navigate the wreckage of their lives. "Do you think they'll be all right, Poirot? The scandal, the loss. It's a heavy burden for them to carry." Poirot's gaze softened, his voice low and thoughtful. "They are strong, Hastings, in their own ways. Madame Marwood, she has the resilience of one who has faced many storms. Mademoiselle Beatrice, her spirit is bruised, but not broken. She will find her path, perhaps with this suitor her father opposed. And Mademoiselle Denham, her courage in speaking the truth, it has set her free from fear. The manor, it will stand, and they will rebuild, as families do when the truth has cleared the shadows." He paused, his fingers tapping lightly on his knee. "But this case, it does enjoy the journey, the quiet before the next storm." The car rounded a bend, and the lights of a distant village came into view, their warm glow a contrast to the cool night. Hastings glanced at his watch, 7:15 p.m., and felt a sense of closure. The case of Marwood Manor had been a labyrinth of clues and motives, from the scratched cigarette case to the forged letter, the shard of glass to the open window, all woven together by Poirot's relentless logic. Yet it was the human element, the grief, the courage, the betrayal, that lingered most in his mind. As they approached the train station where they would board for London, Poirot adjusted his hat and straightened his coat, his movements precise as ever. "Hastings," he said, his voice light but firm, "you must prepare yourself. The next adventure, it will demand all our faculties. But tonight, we rest. For the little grey cells, they have earned it." The car slowed to a stop, and the driver opened the door, the crisp evening air rushing in. Hastings stepped out, his heart lighter despite the weight of the case. Marwood Manor was behind them, its secrets laid bare, its wounds beginning to heal. The station clock struck 7:30 p.m., and as they boarded the train, the whistle's mournful cry seemed a fitting farewell to a mystery solved, a truth revealed, and a chapter closed. Poirot settled into his seat, his eyes half closed, a faint smile on his lips. "To London, mon ami," he murmured, "and to the next puzzle." Hastings smiled, the train lurching forward into the night, carrying them toward new horizons and the inevitable call of another mystery.